Chapter 1 Jamshedji Tata starts a new business. Jamshedji Tata, born in 1839, died in 1904, was a man of business who saw companies as tools for building profound, positive, and lasting change. He founded a company not merely to make profit and create personal wealth, but to improve the lives of his fellow Indians. That is where the Tata story starts. The first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, memorialized Jamshedji Tata as one of the big founders of modern India. He was, Nehru said, a man who took the lead in action, in ideas, a lead that did not fit in with the very climate of opinion, and a lead therefore that showed true courage and vision. The Prime Minister echoed others in calling Jamshedji a visionary and a nation builder. Nehru would doubtless have also agreed with the many who called Jamshedji the father of Indian industry. By all accounts, the soft-spoken Jamshedji was passionate, warm, humble, and driven. These qualities seem to have been encoded in the DNA he passed down to his sons and successors as well. The mission of the multi-billion-dollar Tata companies remains as vividly true today as it was more than 100 years ago when Jamshedji embarked on his first modest entrepreneurial venture. If Jamshedji reformulated what it means to be a captain of industry, he also redefined the role of philanthropist. Listeners have sometimes compared him to Andrew Carnegie, who occupies a prominent space in the pantheon of 19th and early 20th century industrialists turned philanthropists, which also includes the likes of J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller. The difference between these men and Jamshedji Tata is that the Americans built and ran their business first for profit, and only then, after they had made their millions, did they begin thinking about how to share that wealth. Their contributions were and their endowments continue to be profoundly important, but they do not erase a history of careers in dog-eat-dog capitalism. Carnegie the philanthropist was also Carnegie the ruthless strikebreaker. Morgan the art collector was also Morgan the monopolist. Rockefeller, the endeavor of medical research, and so much else was also the Rockefeller whose Standard Oil Trust made him the most hated and feared figure in American business. Jamshedji, in contrast, reflexively thought about others first. The company he built was built for the express purpose of helping the less fortunate and improving everyone's lives, including those of his workers. As great as the philanthropy of Carnegie, Morgan, and Rockefeller was, it was an afterthought, but for Jamshedji Tata, it was the driving thought. Son of an entrepreneur, grandson of priests, Jamshedji was the only son of the 5 children born to ᴑᴏᴇ and given by Tata. He was born on 3rd March 1839 in Navsari, one of the oldest cities in Gujarat, the Indian state known as the Jewel of the West. Navsari was already more than 1,000 years old in the 12th century when members of the Zoroastrian Parsi religion settled there, making it a center of religious culture and learning. ᴑᴏᴇ Tata's father was one in a very long line of Parsi priests and was the first Tata to break with tradition by deciding to become an entrepreneur and a banker instead of a holy man. Yet ᴑᴏᴇ by no means broke with his religion, the values of which he passed down to Jamshedji, who further passed it down to his 2 sons. Chief among these values was the mission to lift others from suffering and improve their lives. In this way, a person becomes righteous and worthy of heaven. Still, like his father, Jamshedji embarked on a business career in 1853 at 40. He joined his father in Bombay, now Mumbai. He enrolled in Elphinstone College, from which he graduated in 1858, having married Hirabai Dabu while he was still a student. The couple would have 2 sons, Dorabji and Ratanji, future Tata Company leaders. Upon graduating, Jamshedji joined his father's trading business and quickly came to understand the intricacies of commodities trading, markets, and banking. His Elphinstone education had been no ivory tower experience. He had lived through the turbulence of the Indian Rebellion of 1857, and subsequent travel to continental Europe, England, and America broadened his education and opened his eyes to what he perceived as vast opportunities available to Indian business. He also had a first-hand education in business failure with the collapse of his father's trading company. His travels in England could not have been much fun, as he had to endure the complaints of local businessmen, some of whom had suffered major losses thanks to his father. Clearly, the experience did not discourage Jamshedji Tata. Not only did he found his own trading company in 1868 at the age of 29, but this English sojourn may have deeply planted in his conscience an overriding need to make things right with his own customers many years later. In 1869, a year after founding his first company, Jamshedji started another. His travels in England had concluded close-up tours of countries many new textile mills. Applying this experience, Jamshedji bought a Brangra oil mill in ᴑᴏᴇ. Located at the time on the outskirts of Bombay, he converted it to cotton production, named it Alexandra Mill, and achieved a success sufficient to attract a buyer 2 years later. he resolved to sink the profit from this sale into a new venture. Uncommon sense. After the sale, Jamshedji decided to continue in the cotton industry. That certainly made sense, but what seemed to violate common sense was his decision to look far beyond Bombay and its environs to set up his new mill. What businessman would deliberately turn his back on the bustling Indian city? A businessman of uncommon sense, a man who, to borrow the phrase Steve Jobs coined for Apple, dared to think different. Jamshedji travelled more than 800 kilometers inland from Bombay to Nagpur in central India, a location in the heart of cotton country. Though remote from almost everything else, indeed compared to Bombay, it was deserted. Jamshedji, however, saw it as a clean slate when he opened the Central India Spinning, Weaving and Manufacturing Company on 1st January 1877. Since the mill commenced operation on the same day that Queen Victoria was installed as Empress of India, Jamshedji named the establishment Empress Mills. By the time of the name change, Jamshedji's cotton enterprise was highly successful. But already he had visions of something far larger for his company and his country. He would build his business to be bigger and better, big enough and good enough to make a difference in the life of India. In a free enterprise, he would say later, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but is in fact the very purpose of its existence. The combination of his world travels, his past religious heritage, and the profound sense of responsibility that success had brought him led Jamshedji Tata to set 3 goals for his business life. The first goal, build an iron and steel plant. Around 1880, while he was visiting Manchester in the heart of industrial England, researching new machinery for Empress Mills, Jamshedji attended a lecture by the celebrated philosopher, essayist, and social critic Thomas Carlyle. Those who control the iron and steel will in time come to control the gold as well, Carlyle remarked to his master audience, and Jamshedji had an epiphany. In a single sentence, Carlyle had outlined a formula for change on a very large scale. It inspired in Jamshedji a vision of an iron and steel company capable of bringing gold to India, transforming the country, lifting at least some of its crushing poverty, and making the growth of truly metropolitan cities possible. With iron and steel, the construction of great buildings, including those of heavy industry, could elevate India from its backward agricultural existence to a place among the great industrial powers of the world. Most entrepreneurs think big. That's what they do, but Jamshedji thought bigger. He envisioned not just a steel mill, but one of such scale and excellence that it would be the envy of the world. Yet he soon discovered that among prominent Indians, he was almost alone in his vision. The vast majority saw no need for such a facility. Moreover, as few as there were who appreciated the value of a state-of-the-art steel mill, far fewer thought that building and running such a plant in India was even possible. Jamshedji sought encouragement from the Chief Commissioner of the Great Indian Peninsula Railway, only to be rebuffed. The chief saw to it every pound of steel rail that the Tata succeeded in making. Instead of being discouraged by the commissioner's oath, Jamshedji took it as a challenge. He hired the best American geologists he could find to locate suitable iron ore in India. When that failed to produce results, Jamshedji and his sons devoted years in an effort to pinpoint the iron fields. In the end, it was the discovery of iron ore deposits in the hills of ᴘᴏᴜᴛ in the state of Mayurbhanj by an Indian geologist Pramada Nath Bose that proved the key. Following the discovery, Bose wrote a letter to Jamshedji Tata on 24th February 1904, which led to the establishment of the Tata's Iron and Steel Company. The next challenge was to engineer water delivery, but once that was solved, construction of the plant began at the village of Sakshi, now in the state of Jharkhand. Even before ground was broken, Jamshedji was thinking in ways quite foreign to the builders of the 19th century industrial revolution. His tours of England industrial town had shown him exactly what he did not want for his steel workers. The English mill towns like Liverpool and Manchester offered workers filthy slums. The belts of England had industrialized so rapidly that builders accommodated the sudden surge of workers by carving out terraced housing on barren hillsides, using the cheapest materials available and depending mostly on gravity to handle sewage. The result created conditions that made dysentery, typhus, and typhoid endemic. Jamshedji resolved not to make the same mistakes. He committed himself to a different path for India. He began by taking the costly and unconventional step of hiring a town planner. In addition to installing a water filtration system to avoid water pollution, he built dedicated outhouses and a grain depot, both unknown in the English mill towns. He wanted to attract and maintain a cadre of skilled workers in his new town, and so he made himself responsible for promoting their well-being. It was a wise human resources investment, of course, but his concern was also the product of a deep sense of responsibility and was the very essence of the ethos of the servant leader, one who cares for the others so that they can better care for themselves and perform with excellence the work that is expected of them. At this point in the Industrial Revolution, managers thought nothing of exploiting their employees. Jamshedji took a different approach. He felt that it was his duty not just to make living conditions tolerable, but to actually improve his workers' lives. His companies offered shorter working hours, provided more comfortable working conditions with special attention to adequate ventilation, perceived as a luxury at the beginning of the 20th century, and created both a pension fund at Empress Mills, 1886 Provident Fund, and an accident fund, 1895 Accident Compensation Fund, at a time when these were rare in the West and almost unheard of in the East. In 1902, Jamshedji began drawing up elaborate plans for creating a truly modern industrial town. His objective was to provide a quality of life his employees would enjoy. Even before the final site had been identified, he devoted a great deal of time to describing the environment he wanted. His requirements include wide streets planted with shady trees, every other of the quick-growing variety. He called for plenty of space for lawns and gardens as well as large areas for football and hockey fields and parks. To ensure that all who came to work for him could continue to practice their diverse faiths within the community, he incorporated Hindu temples, Islamic mosques, and Christian churches. In short, Jamshedji was a visionary who recognized the importance of building a social community to support the industrial community. He believed that Tata Steel would fail unless he created a desirable community to attract the best and brightest workers. The result was a transformation of Sakshi into an enduring model for urban planning and community. In 1919, Lord Chelmsford renamed the city Jamshedpur in honor of Jamshedji Tata, whose birthday is celebrated there as Founders' Day. Jamshedji Tata would not live to see his steel mill or his city completed. On 19 May 1904, while traveling in Germany on business, the 65-year-old business titan succumbed to an illness. Tata oversaw the completion of construction, and on 25th August 1907, the Tata Iron and Steel Company was formally founded. The first steel ingot was produced in 1912 under the supervision of Dorab and his cousin R.D. Tata. Neither held the doubting chief commissioner to his oath that he would eat all the first steel the Tatas managed to produce. Good thing too. By 1939, Tata was operating the biggest steel mill in the British Empire, and today, with manufacturing operations in 26 countries, Tata Steel is the fifth largest steel maker on the planet. The second goal, hydroelectric power for India. As Jamshedji would not live to see his steel plant, he would die before his company realized his second goal, the construction of a vast hydroelectric plant. In the early 20th century, Indian factories and mills relied exclusively on coal for energy. As a result of his world travels, Jamshedji saw that there was a better source, hydroelectric power. Jamshedji not only recognized the importance of low-cost energy to India's continued growth and expansion on a global scale, but it was clear to him that replacing coal with water-produced electricity would greatly reduce the smog and soot that suffocated Bombay and other Indian cities. A visit to Niagara Falls in particular seared into his brain an image of the awesome power of water. He understood that his first step would be to find a water source on which he could build a power plant. Where would he find a waterfall anywhere near Bombay? One day it came to him. After monsoonal rains in Bombay, Jamshedji hired a boat for a cruise of Bombay harbour, intending to show his top executives the magnitude of the water flowing into the harbour from the Roha River. All this water from the Western Ghat is wasted, he told his managers. We should harness it to produce hydroelectric power. Seeing the demonstration of power for themselves, they agreed, and the project was authorized. The Tata Hydroelectric Power Supply Company was established in 1910. Today, Tata Power is India's largest private electric company, providing 4% of the nation's electric power. The third goal, a world-class science institute in India. Jamshedji Tata's central belief was that the key resource that India must leverage to lift itself out of poverty was the raw talent and skills of its people. This, he knew, would not happen by itself. What India needed were world-class educational institutions, and so his third life goal became the establishment of a science institute. Accordingly, in 1898, Jamshedji donated 14 buildings and 4 other properties in Bombay for the establishment of a university dedicated to science. The gift was spectacular, representing approximately half his fortune, about 10 million rupees, roughly $4.56 million in 1898, which is equivalent to $140 million today. The idea of creating a science university met with enthusiasm and widespread agreement, yet progress on creating the institution moved slowly. It would be a dozen years before the Indian Institute of Science opened its door in Bengaluru in 1911, 7 years after Jamshedji's death. The institute was not, however, his first foray into education. As early as 1892, Jamshedji has endowed a scholarship fund to enable deserving Indian students to obtain an education abroad at some of the world's greatest research universities. It was all too clear to him that Indian universities were not committed to study and innovation, and rather than waste valuable time and human resources in what would surely be a prolonged effort to create change in Indian higher education, Jamshedji looked to the outside world. By 1924, it was estimated that some 20% of all Indian civil service employees had been beneficiaries of the Tata endowment. Still, during his lifetime, Jamshedji never abandoned his conviction that improving the Indian system of education was critical to the country's strength and development. In his later years, Indian education, became the central focus of his life. He envisioned a university curriculum that included the study of science and technology, medicine and sanitation, including bacteriology, philosophy and education, ethics and psychology, Indian history and archaeology, and statistics and economics. The depth and breadth of courses would position the new university to be the best in the country and among the best in the world. When he donated half his fortune to the project, Jamshedji drew the attention of the entire nation. Not that everyone saw the wisdom of his gesture, some thought he was a fool for throwing his money away. What jobs would graduates have available to them in India? They asked. Indeed, at the time, there were few answers. Amid many doubters and doubts, the approval of the new institute came slowly, not until 1909, 5 years after Jamshedji's death. The Taj Mahal Hotel. Jamshedji's grandest initiatives took many years to come to fruition. His three biggest dreams were achieved after his death. One highly ambitious dream did come true before his passing, however. It was the product of a vision for a luxury hotel in Bombay. According to some, the source of this passion was Jamshedji's having been denied entry to a Grand Bombay hotel because he was an Indian. But this almost certainly never actually happened. The truth is that Jamshedji Tata built the Taj Mahal Hotel because the so-called luxury hotels in Bombay at the time were in fact little more than hovels. In them, the rats were as plentiful as the menus were limited. Few Americans or Europeans could be enticed to stay in them. Without a truly luxurious hotel built and run in accordance with world-class standards, Bombay, the biggest city in India, would never be a world-class destination. Jamshedji envisioned an opulent hotels as a great and valuable gift he could give the city. In love with the very idea, he funded its construction personally. As usual, skeptics questioned the need. Then they questioned the suitability of an Indian to build it. Once again, Jamshedji persevered against all opposition. He invested an estimated 42 million rupees, the equivalent of $176 million today, to bring his idea to life. When it opened in 1903, the scoffers were forgotten. The hotel quickly became the pride of India. Although eating houses or restaurants were common in Bombay at the time, fine dining and luxury accommodation were not. The Taj was among the most elegant hotels in the world. It was in fact the first building in Bombay to have electricity, and its use of American electric fans, German-made elevators, Turkish baths, and English butlers represented the cutting edge of innovation in hotel amenities. The Taj also featured the city's first ever licensed bar, the first restaurant serving meals all day, and the country's very first nightclub. Furthering his vision, on his deathbed, Jamshedji Tata implored his family to continue all that he had begun. If you cannot make it greater, at least preserve it. Do not let things slide. Go on doing my work and increasing it. But if you cannot, do not lose what we have done. He asked this not for selfish reasons, not because he wanted to claim credit, but because he knew how important all the products of his vision were to the future of India. Jamshedji Tata, Themes of a Career. The story of Jamshedji Tata is more than the sum of a life's chronology. Every key element of the man's makeup has figured as an abiding theme in the history of the Tata Group and its major companies. Jamshedji's commitment to philanthropy, his dedication to serving the needs of others and to improving the lives of all, his intense Indian patriotism, his innovative approach to practically everything, his refusal to compromise on ethics, his commitment to public transparency, his embrace of independence within a corporate community, his passion for setting massive goals and doing great things, his aim to create evolutionary and enduring transformation, and his style of servant leadership. Each of these, through time, has continued as a theme in the narrative of the company he founded.